Morning we've had the Director of Public Prosecutions, Nurdin Haji, has recommended the arrest and prosecution of all parties involved in the 63 billion shilling scandal after tying all the loose ends in the Arara and Kimwarer dam scandal. Among those to be charged are Treasury Cabinet Secretary Henry Rotich, his Permanent Secretary Kamau Thuge, and PS East Africa Community Susan Koech. A number of officials from Kerio Valley Development Authority are also on the list. Haji says the Office of the Director of Public Prosecutions has sufficient evidence of the involvement of the named individuals and has called on all of them to step down from their positions of responsibility. He intends to have them in court where they will face 8 charges, including conspiracy to defraud, willful failure to comply with applicable procedures and guidelines relating to procurement and engaging in a project without prior planning. And our Ken Mijungu is back from the briefing and is picking out some of those particular highlights. Now, Mijungu, we understand that the CS has already surrendered himself to the DCI. What more can you tell us from this developing story?
Well, that's just one of the arrests that are expected today, because on that list there are quite a number of people who will likely go to court anytime from this afternoon. We expect that to happen because as soon as they present themselves at the DCI for the processing, they will be definitely taken to court. But as you mentioned, there are a number of things that we can pick out of this, and we are going to play that statement, part of that statement, in a little bit. But this story must be told from the 18th of September 2018, when this report was first made to the Directorate of Criminal Investigations, when these complaints were made. Then we have to go to the late February 2019, where there was preliminary investigations that were done by the Directorate of Criminal Investigation and forwarded to the DPP. And then, Zainab, we definitely have to go to June 2019. This is when there was a lot of back and forth on this. So let's play this statement, then we can come back to the highlights of what more was said in this press conference.
I have today directed the DCI to effect the arrest and immediate arraignment before court of the accused persons named below herein. 1. Henry Kiplagat Rotich, Cabinet Secretary, National Treasury. Kamau Thuge, Principal Secretary, National Treasury. Dr. Susan Jemtai Koech, Principal Secretary, Ministry of East African Community. David Kipchumba Kimosop, Managing Director, Kerio Valley Development Authority. Kennedy Nyakundi Nyachiro, Chief Economist and Head of Europe 2 Division, National Treasury. Jackson Njao Kinyanjui, Director, Resource Mobilization Department, National Treasury. Titus Murithi, Inspector General of State Corporations. Paolo Poselli, Director, CMC de Ravenna. CMC de Ravenna Itinera Joint Venture Italy, CMC de Ravenna Itinera Joint Venture Kenya. William Kipkemboi Maina, Head of Supply Chain Management, KVDA. Paul Kipkoech Serem, Manager Engineering Services, KVDA. Francis Chepkonga Kipkech, Tender Committee, KVDA. Samuel Kimutai Koskei, Tender Committee, KVDA. David Juma Onyango, Tender Committee, KVDA. Patrick Kipto, Tender Committee, KVDA. Elizabeth Kebenei, Tender Committee, KVDA. Esther Jepchirchir Kiror, Tender Committee, KVDA. Moses Kipchumba, Ad Hoc Technical and Financial Evaluation Committee, 2, KVDA. Engineer Nelson Korir, Ad Hoc Technical and Financial Evaluation Committee 2, KVDA. Engineer Isaac M. Kiiru, Ad Hoc Technical, Financial and Evaluation Committee Team 2, KVDA. Engineer Patrick Kipsang, Ad Hoc Technical and Financial Evaluation Committee Team 2, KVDA. Frederick Towet, Ad Hoc Technical and Financial Evaluation Committee Team 2, KVDA. Jotham Ruto, Ad Hoc Technical Financial Evaluation Committee Team 2, KVDA. Charity Mui, Ad Hoc Technical and Financial Evaluation Committee Team 2, KVDA. Geoffrey Mwangi Wahungu, CEO, National Environment Management Authority. David Walunya Ongare, National Environment Management Authority. Boniface Mamboleo Lengisho, National Environment Management Authority. for the following offences. 1. Conspiracy to defraud contrary to Section 317 of the Penal Code, Cap 63 Laws of Kenya. Failure to comply with applicable procedures and guidelines relating to procurement contrary to Section 45 2B as read with Section 48 of the Anti-Corruption and Economic Crimes Act No. 3 of 2003. Engaging in a project without prior planning contrary to Section 45 2C as read with Section 48 of Anti-Corruption and Economic Crimes Act No. 3 of 2003. Abuse of office contrary to Section 46 as read with Section 48 of the Anti-Corruption and Economic Crimes Act No. 3 of 2003. Committing an offence of financial misconduct contrary to Section 197(1) or I of the Public Finance Management Act No. 18 of 2012. Fraudulent acquisition of public property contrary to Section 45 1A as read with Section 48 of the Anti-Corruption and Economic Crimes Act 2003. Knowingly giving a misleading document to principal contrary to Section 41(2) as read with Section 48 of Anti-Corruption and Economic Crimes Act No. 3 of 2003 of the Laws of Kenya.
Charges and 28 individuals, all of them are expected to be at the DCI where Nuru is currently. But Zainab, just to tell you where this began, I just mentioned it began in February, but one of the things and the highlights for me in the statement made by the DPP is the fact that he says that the investigations that they did over time, running into almost a year now, established that the government officials, not the government officials mentioned, flouted all procurement rules and abused their oath of office to ensure the scheme went through. Now, that was the highlight of this statement for me. And if you go deep into the statement, you ask yourself, so what was this scheme? What is this that went through? What did they seek to achieve? And you find that the explanation given is that whereas the alleged commercial transaction signed between KVDA and CMC de Rovena Etenera JV clearly states that the two dams will have cost about 46 billion shillings. You find that the National Treasury went ahead to renegotiate a facility that increased that amount to 63 billion shillings. That's almost 17 billion shillings more. Now, this is a commercial facility that came later negotiated by the National Treasury. Now, Zainab, the most interesting thing about this negotiation is that this contract was done in dollars. By the time it was being paid, it was paid in euros, which means it also increased because the euro exchange value and the dollar in this country is a little more. So it means this also increased it significantly. Now, the National Treasury entered into this facility in euros, and that's not all. We were told that about 643 million shillings was also released by the National Treasury as a counterpart fund, which was intended to resettle the people who are going to be affected by the two projects. Remarkably, at the end of it, this land was never acquired. The project was never done. The money was released by the Treasury, and this money has been paid. Now let's go back to the 19 billion, whereby the DPP did not want to commit on the figure. He says they'll explain in court how they reached that figure. But let's take a look at the 11 billion shillings. Now, the 11 billion shillings out of the 19 billion shillings was paid upfront for insurance. Very interesting, because this work had not commenced. Well, there are other monies that were released also that went to the project, but the project has not commenced. Now, the other interesting thing about this transaction, Zainab, is this. The interest for the insurance, which was 11 billion, was supposed to be paid upfront. The government did not have this money, so what did? They went and collected money, borrowed this money, paid the interest for this money. Then the interest that they borrowed to pay the interest is accruing. So it means we are paying interest for money that was borrowed to pay interest for a job that has not begun. Very interesting indeed, Zainab.
Those are some of the intrigues we'll definitely be looking into as we continue to have this discussion. And of course, also something very important that the DPP also mentioned was the inclusion of the governments of the UK and Italy in terms of looking into these particular investigations in phases. But before that, let me also bring in our reporter and my colleague Nuru Abdulaziz from the Directorate of Criminal Investigations Headquarters along Kiambu Road. We understand that the Treasury Cabinet Secretary together with PS Thuge have already surrendered themselves at the DCI. Nuru, what more details can you tell us from that?
Thank you very much, Zainab. A few minutes ago, Senator Kipchumba Murkomen just arrived at the DCI headquarters. He says that he is representing one of the suspects. Unfortunately, he has not mentioned the one he is representing. We hope that we will get the information during the day as this whole situation unfolds. Now, Zainab, at this specific time, the CS Henry Rotich is already at the DCI, and we hope that we'll get to understand what's really happening here at the end of the day, and as we bring you the rest of the bulletins. It is alleged that the National Treasury had spent 20.5 billion on the ghost projects on the Arara and Kimwarer dams. Also, the DPP Haj had said earlier that he has enough evidence to implicate the suspects he mentioned earlier today. He says that the Finance Ministry and KVDA had procured or used the 20.5 billion shillings on the ghost projects. It is during this month on 10th July, some security officials had traveled to Italy to look into this whole situation, and I hope that by the end of the day we'll be able to get the whole information as it unfolds. Now, back to you, Zainab.
All right, Nuru Abdulaziz from the DCI headquarters along Kiambu Road, of course, telling us that Elgeyo Marakwet Senator Kipchumba Murkomen has arrived. He says he is representing one person, but we do not exactly know who that person is. We're going to go back to my colleague Ken Mijungun. Of course, Ken, like I mentioned earlier on, the DPP said something very important, said due to the international nature of this particular case, he is involving the governments of the UK and the government of Italy in terms of trying to look into ways on how to proceed with this investigation. What then does this mean in terms of playing out in this investigation?
Very interesting, because the first thing that you have to notice, CMC de Ravenna is an Italian company. The interesting thing about this company is that at the time it was being awarded this contract, it was this firm, KVDA, and all these stakeholders, all these people involved were aware that this firm was running bankrupt. It was not able to undertake this project, but they worked according to the DPP together, and they conspired to ensure that CMC de Ravenna got this contract. So the other question is, the DPP has been traveling around the world looking for what? That's the question. Mutual legal assistance is the answer, because when finally they get these people and they prosecute them and they find them guilty, they'll need to recover their assets. So what do is you ensure that you close all these loopholes, that every money that they have, they cannot take it out of the country. And even if they've already taken it out of the country, then they're able to get it back. So that's why you would see him going to Italy, going to the UK. He was in Dubai the other week just to see all those loopholes, because when you're going to prosecute someone who has allegedly stolen or taken public funds, they're so clever as to find ways of hiding it. So what do? They make sure they put it in a place that you cannot access it. You prosecute them here, but the money is safe. So what the DPP has been doing with this is to ensure that all these loopholes are sealed. If this money is going to be in any of those countries that have been traveling, because they have intelligence that these are the countries that this money went to, so they ensure that they seal all these loopholes, that they can bring the money back, because the ultimate aim of this process is to get back public funds that have been lost. So it's not necessary to prosecute if at the far end or the tail end of the process you don't recover the money. So Zainab, that's essentially the value of these visits to these countries and seeking mutual legal assistance. Even the FBI in these investigations, the UK has extended its services of prosecutor and investigator to this country to ensure that at the end of it they get justice and Kenyans get their money back. So that's the value. So going forward, the most interesting interesting thing to see in all this is what's going to happen. They're going to step aside. The laws that establish public service says that when you are charged, you have to step aside and create space and allow for investigations, because if you can be allowed to go back to your office, interfere with the witnesses, shred such documents, and talk to the people who are subordinate or who are under you to help you conceal evidence, it's unnecessary. So they ensure that all these loopholes are sealed by and include getting you out of the system for the time being. And remember, this is a process. At the end of it, if you're not found guilty, perhaps in your own accord, you can decide to get back your job. It never happens. But yes, at the tail end, all Kenyan wants is this money went out, this is borrowed money, we have gotten it, we've traced it where it was, and it's back in the country, Zainab. So very interesting days ahead, looking at this arrest. And if you look at that complete list, 28 individuals, you look at them and you're thinking, really, is this going to turn political? Also, very good questions that also we need to ask going forward in the coming days. But most important, Zainab, Treasury is vacant.
All right, Ken, and we'll be getting more details. Of course, as you mentioned, is the fact that the DPP Nurdin Haji had stated that the CS and the PS will have to step down from their positions, but that hasn't really ever happened before, looking back at the history of our country, really.
Yes, exactly. But let me take you back a few weeks ago when the president said, when you are mentioned, you just have to step aside. I mean, even your own morals can't allow you to sit back in that office. It's never seen, but it's time things changed, and that really happened because you have been charged, you have taken plea, you're a public service. I mean, there's nothing left for you. The only reason this has never happened, Zainab, is this. Most of these people who have been charged are elected officials, governors, right? Members of parliament, you look at MCAs and such. They are elected officials. Now, we are talking here of appointed officials by the president. I mean, this mandate is given to you through the prerogative of the president. So one of his constitutional functions. So he can take it back. And remember, it's exercised on behalf of the people in Article 1. So it's very important to note all that when arguing about should they step aside or not, is the fact that they are public officials and they're appointed, not elected. So it's never happened because most of these people who've been charged, look at the governors, they are elected. But now we have public officials who are working on our behalf. So they have to step aside. There is no two ways about it. I think it's a moral thing to do. And I take you back to 2014, if I'm not wrong, the list that had over 120 names that was presented in Parliament by President Uhuru Kenyatta. The likes of the Kitui Governor now, Charity Ngilu, were on that list. And they had to step aside. Look at Governor for Kirinyaga, Anne Waiguru. When the kitchen became too hot, she had to step aside. So most appointed officials have no option but to step aside. Now the question, Zainab, is what happens to Treasury? Who now signs? Because the government cannot stop functioning. Who was the third in command? Is it the CAS who's now in charge? And probably we're likely to see State House later today or before the end of the day, before the end of the week, because this is a vital service of the government, will come up and put someone in acting capacity, a minister who is a CS who is currently serving, put them in acting capacity so that the functions of the Treasury can still go on. We saw that in lands, we saw that in health, so it's likely to happen also in the Treasury as the President prepares to get another round of nominees to present to Parliament for voting. Alternatively, he could just look around the cabinet right now of about 20 remaining and just assign someone there, then a vacant position. And remember, by the way, interestingly, this just came to my mind, Zainab, there is a cabinet secretary without portfolio, Rafael Tuju. I mean, this is his work. You have no portfolio, you can fill in where there is no one. So perhaps this is one of the functions of a cabinet secretary without portfolio. So you might just find the president filling in that position using a cabinet secretary who is already there but without an assignment to fill that gap as they wait to fill it with a substantive cabinet secretary. So that's likely to happen. But there's a vital question going forward, and in our bulletins we'll have to really tell Kenyans what exactly means for Treasury, government functions, and what does that also mean for the two individuals, Kamau Thuge and Henry Rotich, and aside from that, the other 26 individuals from KVDA and the two from NEMA.
All right, Ken, thank you so much for that, Ken, there from the newsroom. And of course, very interesting dynamics coming to the fore. It's a story that we are following up for you very, very closely. Of course, at this point, the Treasury Cabinet Secretary, together with PS Kamau Thuge, have already peacefully surrendered themselves to the Directorate of Criminal Investigations headquarters along Kiambu Road. Following that order by the Director of Public Prosecutions, we'll be getting more details from that side. Our Nuru Abdulaziz is on standby. Our Cabinet Secretary for the National Treasury, Henry Kiplagat Rotich, has served in that capacity since the onset of the Jubilee administration. His 25-year career in finance now stands threatened with the corruption charges leveled against him over the Arara and Kimwarer dam scandals that are said to have cost the country some 19 billion shillings. NTV's Brenda Wanga looks back at the highlights of Rotich's time at Treasury.
Before taking that oath of office as the first Cabinet Secretary for the newly created Ministry of National Treasury, Henry Rotich had served in the then Ministry of Finance as the head of macroeconomics for 6 years. His new posting required that he manage the country's national government finances, including overseeing the setup of an efficient and sustainable public financial management under the devolution system of government. But it wasn't long before the Cabinet Secretary ran into headwinds in the management of the country's funds.
Proposed to increase the rate of...
He had hardly served for a full year when he was put on the defense regarding claims of loss of parts of the proceeds of the 250 billion shillings Eurobond.
Funding this and...
During his tenure, he has also presided over a borrowing spree that has seen the country's public debt hit unprecedented levels of 5.27 trillion shillings from 1.8 trillion shillings in just 7 years. But it is the Arara and Kimwarer dam scandal that is proving to be his Waterloo. The dam's saga is believed to have cost the country a possible loss of 21 billion shillings. Trouble started early in the year, and the CS had to spend close to 2 days at the Directorate of the Criminal Investigations answering questions into the awarding of the tenders for the construction of the dams. Today, the Office of the Director of Public Prosecution brought to an end speculation on the fate of the Cabinet Secretary and other senior officials in the ministry and the parastatals involved.
I have today directed the DCI to effect the arrest and immediate arraignment before court of the accused persons named below herein. 1. Henry Kiplagat Rotich, Cabinet Secretary, National Treasury.
The directive from the DPP's office now means that the CS will have no option but to comply with an earlier order from the President. The CS is expected to be arrested and charged for a number of offences, including conspiracy to defraud the government. Brenda Wanga, NTV.
Well, away from that developing story, over 50 trucks carrying tons of maize are currently stuck in Mombasa. This is after their maize failed to get into the market due to the ongoing maize importation row. The businessmen, reportedly from Tanzania, are complaining that they have been in Mombasa for several days. According to some of the drivers, their employers sent them to Kenya with the commodity following concerns raised that there is a shortage of the grain. Kevin Mutai spoke to some of the drivers in Mombasa.
Local millers, according to the drivers, it has been more than 5 days of waiting.
Wanasema Kenya kuna uhaba wa chakula. Tunavoleta chakula tena umo njiani tunapambana askari. Askari anapanga kiwango yeye anachotaka aweze kupata akizi matatizo ya kwake. Haangalii wewe umetoka wapi. Sasa hilo ni tatizo nao. Pili, tumefika hapa. Tumevuka mpaka leo siku ya 5. Hakuna kinachoendelea na mpaka sasa hatuelewi. Ni lini tutaondoka? Ni lini kinachoendelea hatujui.
The pull and push of a maize shortage in the country has seemingly opened a window of opportunity for dubious imports, with some stakeholders within the Ministry of Agriculture claiming that the shortage is artificial and only meant to benefit cartels.
Ombi langu kubwa, kama itawezekana wenye viwanda waweze kuchukua mahindi kwa haraka, angalau siku tuepushe gharama, ama gari ziweze zuiwa hata mpakani ziingie kwa idadi ambao wanaweza kushukisha. Kama wanaweza kushukisha gari 15 kwa siku, gari zije hizo 15 ili zisije kukaa. Zikifika ziingie mtamboni, zishushe na ziweze kuondoka. Kuliko kuja kujazana hapa, watu wanakaa wiki 2-3, wanapata gharama kubwa ambayo ni ni gharama kubwa kuliko hela ambayo dereva analipwa ama msaidizi wake.
The Strategic Food Reserve maintains that the grain is enough to sustain the country for several months until the next harvest. Kevin Mutai, NTV, Mombasa.
And to some sad news now, and students from Masinde Muliro University in Kakamega County woke up to shocking news this morning after one of the students was found dead in her house. The body of 22-year-old Fauzia Aidan Ibrahim, a third-year disaster management student, was found lying in a pool of blood in her home in Muyala area. It is alleged that the deceased succumbed as she tried to carry out an abortion. Her colleagues, led by student leaders, expressed their grief. Her friends said that the deceased had been sick for 3 days and had agreed to go to the hospital, but failed to. Kakamega OCPD David Kabena said investigations have begun to determine the exact cause of the death. Fauzia's body has been taken to the Kakamega Hospital mortuary awaiting post-mortem.
Wakiwa na shida, waambie wenzao ama wajaribu kufika katika hospitali. 1 month ago tumepoteza mwingine hapo Kefingo kwa nyumba na mwingine tulipoteza kwa road accident. So si tunasema tunaomba maombi.
Nimesikia vibaya sana, lakini tunazidi kuomba Mungu atusaidie na atukinge.
Very sad indeed. Well, listen to this quote. The competency-based curriculum is meant for the privileged child. End of quote. Now, that controversial statement coming from the Education Standard Quality Assurance Council Chair, Chris Galgalo, was faulted the CBC system and wants its implementation postponed.
During a Parents' Day meeting at the Isaac Memorial High School in Chalbi Sub-County in Marsabit, the chair of the Education Standard Quality Assurance Council pleaded with Education Cabinet Secretary George Magoha. Galgalo says a number of schools in arid and semi-arid land regions such as Isiolo, Marsabit, Wajir, Garissa, Mandera and Tana River are grappling with challenges such as lack of learning materials, understaffing and poor infrastructure, which will affect the quality of education.
Research imefanywa. Hata juzi jana walikuwa hapa. Tarehe 18 walikuwa hapa Marsabit. Collecting views on what kama already curriculum is implemented.
The youth are not employed.
In April, over 91,000 teachers across the country were trained in the competency-based curriculum, and another exercise is expected to take place in August. This month, the Education Cabinet Secretary launched a countrywide CBC review where stakeholders discussed the improvement of learning outcomes and the overall quality of education.
It's circle in shape. Can you say circle? Circle!
The government hopes to enroll the curriculum among grade 4 pupils in 2020. Sharon Baranga, NTV.
Now, a section of Jubilee party leaders have refuted claims that they have been privately hiding in the handshake between President Uhuru Kenyatta and opposition chief Raila Odinga to popularize Odinga's 2022 presidential bid. The team, led by Nyeri Town Member of Parliament Ngunjiri Wambugu, amongst others, maintain their loyalty lies with the president and they would defend him against any attacks.
Tunafaa tujue ikiwa hakuna kiongozi ambaye ako na amani ya kutuongoza, afadhali ukose pesa, ukose kazi, lakini kama nchi ukuwe na amani. Kwa hivyo mimi nawaomba tushikilie rais wetu Uhuru Muigai Kenyatta aweze kuendesha zile big four agenda, kwa sababu bila hizo vitu hakuna vile tunaendelea.
You see us supporting the handshake. We are not supporting the handshake because we are campaigning for a candidate. We are supporting the handshake because our president and the party leader of our party has initiated the handshake. Now, Some people imagine that we are campaigning for Raila when we say that. I assure you we are not. I can tell you for a fact, leo Uhuru na Raila wakikosana, tutarudi tu pale pale tulikuwa. But we tell people, mimi nilikuwa natafuta kiti ya Nyeri. Sikuwa natafuta kiti ya president.
Kiambu Senior Principal Magistrate Stella Atambo read the Riot Act to the prosecution and the Presbyterian Church of East Africa, which former moderator David Gathunju and 2 others are charged with stealing 50.9 million shillings. She set aside 3 days in October when the case must continue, failure to which the court will take appropriate measures to have the case concluded, citing waste of court's time. During the mention of the case, the prosecution said it was not ready to proceed with the case as there were new directions. Gathunju's lawyer, Kimani Wamikima, said his client is concerned with the snail pace that the case has taken since it started 2 years ago. Gathunju is charged alongside James Njane, who was a finance officer, and Peter Kamuthu, former communications director at the church. Now, the top 100 mid-sized companies survey for 2019 has been launched. The initiative between the Nation Media Group's Business Daily and KPMG seeks to recognize mid-sized companies that thrive in their spaces by creating employment for Kenyans, running efficiently and positively impacting the economy, and underlaying companies that make a turnover of between 50 million shillings and 1 billion shillings have been called upon to enter the survey, which has proved beneficial for hundreds of companies, including those that have entered Club 101, which is a group of companies with an annual turnover that has exceeded the 1 billion shilling mark.
Purely concerned about the operational function of the business. Today, as we see it, it's becoming very structured. It has become very structured, and we are more strategic in everything that we do. And we have seen growth. I'm glad to say we've seen growth of over 100%. And we know that this is what we desire. We intend to continue growing.
It's given us good exposure in terms of publicity, being associated with KPMG and the Nation Media Group. Even the financial institutions take it very, very positively when they see a company is participating in awards like Top 100 and Club 101.
So for us at Nation and as journalists, we don't see supporting business as an extension of our business, but rather as a duty in keeping to that mission. We see that most of the SMEs will focus primarily on the operational side of business. But for them to move and scale up, they need to go to the strategic part of it.
According to Kenya National Bureau of Statistics, 5.6 million working age Kenyans are currently economically inactive. And the largest unemployment rate is recorded in the age cohort of between 20 and 24 years. This is 19.2%. I believe that supporting the growth of SMEs in this country is one of the solutions that will help create employment and reduce this number significantly.
While in other stories making headlines across our borders, South Africa's President Cyril Ramaphosa on Sunday slammed as fundamentally and irretrievably flawed findings by a watchdog concerning a donation to his 2017 campaign to hear the ruling party, or rather to head the ruling party. The country's public protector, Busiwiswe Muhebanwe, said in an explosive report on Friday that Ramaphosa deliberately misled the National Assembly when he responded to an opposition question in Parliament last November. Ramaphosa initially told lawmakers that the payment was to his son Andile for consultancy work for Bosasa, now known as Africa Global Operations, but he later said it was a donation towards his campaign to become African National Congress party leader.
The report contains numerous factual inaccuracies of a material nature. The findings were found are wrong in law, are irrational, and in some instances exceed the scope of the powers of the public protector. I have therefore decided to seek an urgent judicial review of the public protector's report, its findings, and its remedial action. I have instructed my legal representatives to prepare an application to this effect as a matter of urgency.
All right, and away from that, let's now take a look at stories making headlines in the world of sports, and we have Brian Twal just for that.
Thank you so much, Zainab. Let's have a look at what's making headlines in sports currently. And Kenyan champions Gor Mahia have been drawn against Al Aigle Noir, that is of Burundi, in the preliminary round of the CAF Champions League. Last year, Gor narrowly missed out on the group stage after going down 2-0 to Nigeria's Lobby Stars. The aggregate winner of the first round will meet either USM Alger of Algeria or Niger's Sonidep in the second round. Meanwhile, Bandari will be out to make amends of their poor performance in the 2016 Confederation Cup when they take on Sudan's Al Ahli Shandi in the preliminary round. The Dockers, who are returning to the competition after winning the SportPesa Shield last season, were bundled out by Congolese side St. Etoile Elua Lupopo in the preliminary round following a 3-1 aggregate loss. Should the Dockers win, they will face either US Ben Gwaden of Tunisia or South Sudan's Amarat in the next round. And Football Kenya Federation President Nick Mwendwa has appointed communication head Barry Otieno as the new CEO on an interim basis, replacing Robert Mudhomi, who stepped aside following his fallout from the botched John Avire transfer from Sofapaka to Egyptian side. Meanwhile, an investigation committee has been set up to investigate the former CEO's conduct and give their report within 30 to 45 days.
We want to maintain fairness for all parties involved, the club, the player, and the CEO, so that we can allow the committee to do its work properly and thoroughly and make a report to us on how to move forward. In the meantime, the emergency committee of FKF sat yesterday and made a resolution that in the foregoing, Barry Otieno will act as CEO of FKF with full authority in that period of time while Robert is away and while the work is being done, so that FKF can continue to execute its mandate as per the statutes and as required by our regulations.
Moving on, Imran Hakada cleared the ground with all his opponents as the sixth round of the KCB Kenya National Autocross Championship came to an end at the Rift Valley Motocross Racetrack in Solai. Hakada, who drove in two classes, won the two-wheel drive turbo class in the event's fastest overall, beating his Izmir racing teammate Shailene Mughal to second as defending champion Kunal Patel completed the podium dash. Hakada, a former two-wheel drive turbo champion, came in second in the open class behind Kirit Rajut. Rehan Shah won the four-wheel drive D-Turbo class, beating defending champion Sahib Omar to achieve the feat. Yuvraj Rajput extended his lead on the Bambino log, beating Ilyan Mughal and Tevin Soni. And players from European soccer heavyweights Barcelona and Chelsea arrived at a central Tokyo for a party held in their honor before the teams meet in pre-season friendly. New Barcelona signing Antoine Griezmann was among the players attending the event, and the Frenchman could make his Barcelona debut in the match on Tuesday following his move from Atletico Madrid. Midfielder Frank de Jong and a recent recruit from Ajax is another who could play in Barcelona.
Wake up to nothing but the best in news, conversation starters and hard-hitting interviews that keep you informed for the day ahead.
Up and early, 6 on the nose, these people don't sleep. Fix first the data protection law, then we come up with the number.
Exactly my question to CS Joe Michelle.
Welcome to Living with This. I'm your host, Sharon Mundia. Boy, have you missed out.
Stop your wheel, game done.
Thank you for joining us on NTV today.
We have our reporters in different locations.
NTV is right here to bring you everything from the beginning to the end.
Hii ni NTV Sasa.
Kuna mambo mengi sana ambayo yanafanyika.
Sasa ni kumtuliza. Hii inaitwa sensory integration.
Shughuli pevu ya kudunda viwanjani narejea kwake
na kurudisha hapa studioni.
Kuna mengi ambayo yanaendelea kujiri katika maeneo tofauti.
In the day's matches, the men's team beat visiting Sports Authority of India 3-1 in the opening match, while the Kenya Hockey Union ladies development team thrashed Indian ladies 4-2. Meanwhile, the tournament's host Sikh Union hit Arusha from Tanzania 6-1. The tournament, organized by the Nairobi Hockey Association and Kenya Hockey Union, was organized to inaugurate a new AstroTurf at the Sikh Union Club, which is the first to be installed with the aim of improving the game. And Vapor Sports are the champions of the 7th edition of the Dagoretti North Simbarati Football Tournament, as they saw off escalators by a solitary goal, with Colin Sidapa being on target to help his team take home the tournament's trophy, jerseys as well as cash prizes. Buffalo beat Constructors 3-2 in the third place playoff. The tournament, organized by Dagoretti North MP, saw 12 teams take part with the aim of developing talents in the area.
I've seen so many teams coming up, actually so many clubs forming up. Now that today you've seen, even I've recruited a team that I wanted to be called Dagoretti North FC. I wanted to be, to compete nationally. And we have the best of the players in Dagoretti. Nikiji Wanyama, they came from here.
To some other grassroots football, and Melta Kabiria climbed to third place at the Super 8 Premier League following a comfortable 4-0 win over their struggling rivals Kakamega United at the Riruta Stadium. Dalton Musa scored a brace before Collins Omondi came off the bench to score twice as well. Kabiria climbed to 2 places up to third on 29 points, just 2 behind second place Githurai All-Stars, who won 2-0 against Makadara Junior League, and 4 shy of leaders Jericho All-Stars. In other results, 2017 champions Kakamega went down 4-1 to Melta Kabiria. Githurai All-Stars beat Makadara Junior League 2-0, while Naisa saw off Shaurimoyo Sportif by a solitary goal. Well, that's the latest in sports. We're following up on the Chan team that is in camp ahead of their match against Tanzania, and the women's team also in camp. And the CS Sports, Amina Mohammed, will be meeting the athletics fraternity. We'll be following up on that as well in our subsequent bulletins. Back to you, Zainab.
All right, thank you so much, Brian. Well, that brings us to the end of our bulletin this hour. Remember, we are keeping an eye on for you and all the stories making headlines across the country and beyond, especially that is happening at the DC headquarters along Kiambu Road. My name is Zainab Ismail. Have a good afternoon.